and throughout this country. We have been building jails and more jails and more jails. It is time to stop building jails and invest in the future of our young people. Our young people should be working or in school, not rotting in a jail cell. But criminal justice reform goes further. It requires us to take a hard look at local police departments all across this country. I was a mayor in Burlington, Vermont for 8 years. Come up and visit us. Beautiful city, beautiful state. And, right, and Fish is a pretty good band as well. And I have worked with police departments and police officers all across this country. Truth is that the average police officer today is honest, hardworking, and has a very difficult job to do. But like any other public official, when a police officer breaks the law, that officer must be held accountable. We must demilitarize local police departments. We must make police departments reflect the diversity of the communities they serve. We must end corporate ownership of prisons and detention centers. We must change law enforcement culture so that the understanding is that lethal force, shooting someone, is the last response, not the first response. We must rethink the so-called war on drugs. Over the last 30 years, millions of Americans have received police records for possessing marijuana. Under the Federal Controlled Substance Act, marijuana is listed today as a Schedule I drug, right next to heroin. Now, people can argue about the pluses and minuses of marijuana, but no sane person thinks that it is equivalent to heroin. And that is why, if elected president, we're going to take marijuana out of the federal control zone. Now, you all know that whether or not marijuana is legal is a state decision, not a federal decision. There will be an item on the ballot here in November calling for the legalization of marijuana. For a wide variety of reasons, if I were a citizen of California, I would vote yes on that item. But when we talk about drugs, we have got to acknowledge that in our country today, we have a major crisis, and that is an epidemic of opiate and heroin addiction. Now, if we are going to be successful in addressing this crisis, we have got to be smart. And being smart means, in my view, that we've got to approach this crisis by understanding that substance abuse and addiction should not be treated as a criminal issue, but as a health issue. And that is why we need a revolution in mental health treatment in America. People who are struggling with addiction or substance abuse, people who are facing mental health crises. And by the way, we have a growing number of suicides in this country. We have thousands of people who are walking the streets of this country right now who are suicidal and maybe homicidal. And that is why we have got to understand that when people need treatment, they must get it now, not 6 months from now. This campaign is going to win because we are listening to women. Women are tired of working for 79 cents on the dollar compared to men. Women want the whole damn dollar in their right. And I know that every man here will stand with the women in the fight for pay equity. And women and all of us are getting awfully tired about hearing about Republican family values. Because we understand exactly what Republican family values are. And what those values, so-called values are, is to tell every woman in California and in this country she cannot control her own body. We disagree. And what Republican family values are about is to tell our gay brothers and sisters that they cannot get married. We disagree. This campaign is listening to young people. And young people are asking me, how does it happen when they do exactly the right thing, when they go out and get the best education that they can? Why does it happen that they end up $30,000, $50,000, $70,000 in debt? Now here is the truth. 40, 50 years ago, you had a high school degree, you can go out and get a pretty good job and make it into the middle class. Today, by and large, those days are gone. A changing technology, a changing economy means that people today need more education than they used to. That is just the fact. And that means that today, when we talk about public education, we can't just talk about first grade through 12th grade. In a competitive global economy, when we talk about free public education today, it must include free tuition at public colleges and universities. Does anybody here think that that is a radical idea? It absolutely is not. It is an eminently sensible idea if our economy is to be strong in the future. It is an idea which already exists in Germany, exists in Scandinavia, and in other countries. Those countries are smart enough to know that their future rests with their young people. They invest in their young people, and that is something we should be doing as well. And not only should we be making public colleges and universities tuition free, we should be substantially reducing student debt. Think about it for a second. Think outside of the box. Think about it in a way that the media or Congress or the pundits don't want you to think about it. Think about the stupidity of punishing millions of people because they went out and got an education to make our country stronger. And that is why together we are going to allow people with student debt to refinance their loans at the lowest interest rates they can find. Now, my opponents and a lot of the corporate establishment, they say, well, you know, Bernie is a nice guy, he's Santa Claus, he's got white hair, he's going to give away all of these gifts, free tuition, lower student debt. How are you going to pay for it, Bernie? I will tell you exactly how we're going to pay for it. You know, 8 years ago, when the greed and recklessness and illegal behavior on Wall Street drove this country into the worst economic downturn since the Great Depression, Congress, against my vote, voted to bail out Wall Street. So that's only natural because Wall Street has all of the power. They make all kinds of campaign contributions. They pay people all kinds of money to give speeches. So of course Congress bailed out Wall Street. Well, I take a slightly different approach. I think it is time now for us to impose a tax on Wall Street speculation. And that tax will raise more than enough money to make public colleges and universities tuition free and significantly reduce student debt in America. This campaign understands that the greatness of a nation is not the number of billionaires it has or the number of nuclear weapons it has. The greatness of a nation is how we treat the weakest and most vulnerable people amongst us. Today in California, in Vermont, and all over this country, millions of senior citizens and disabled veterans are trying to survive on $11,000 or $12,000 a year Social Security. And the truth is, you cannot survive on $11,000 a year. Now, in response, if you can believe it, my Republican colleagues in the Senate who want to give billions in tax breaks to the rich, they want to cut Social Security. Well, I've got some bad news for them. We're not going to cut Social Security. We're going to expand Social Security. This campaign is listening to the Latino community. And the Latino community reminds us that there are 11 million undocumented people in this country. And I just met with some people today, a few hours ago, who told us what is absolutely true, that every single day, today and tomorrow, undocumented people are being exploited, are being cheated out of their wages. Because when you are undocumented, your employer can do anything he wants and you cannot fight back. And that is why together we are going to pass comprehensive immigration reform and a path towards citizenship. That is why we are going to end the current deportation policy. Our immigration policy must be to unite families, not divide families. And if Congress does not do its job, I will use the executive powers of the presidency to do all that I can. This campaign is listening to the African American community. And they are asking us a very sensible question. How is it that we have trillions to spend on a war in Iraq we never should have gotten into? But supposedly we don't have the money to rebuild inner cities in America. And they are right. And that is why together we are going to change national priorities big time. Instead of fighting wars that we should not be in, instead of fighting a perpetual war in the Middle East, we're going to invest in inner cities, rural communities, create jobs and good education for our kids. I have been all over this country, brothers and sisters, and I have seen poverty and misery, the likes of which should not be occurring in America in 2016. And together we are going to end that. This campaign is listening to a people whose pain is very rarely heard, and that is the Native American community. Everybody here knows that from way back when, from before the time when this country became a country, when the first settlers came here, the Native American people were lied to, they were cheated, and treaties they negotiated were abrogated. But we also know that the Native American people have enriched our culture in ways that we can never repay. If you think about it, I mean, all that they have given to us that we now take for granted. And perhaps the most important lesson that they have taught us, and a very profound lesson it is that as human beings, we are part of nature. We must live with nature. And if we continue to destroy nature, we are destroying the human species. And yet, despite all that they have given us, the truth is that today, in many Native American communities, on reservations and elsewhere, all over this country, poverty rate, unemployment rate, extremely high. Healthcare conditions, educational opportunities, very limited. If elected president together, we are going to fundamentally change the relationship between the federal government and the Native American people. Now, I know that a brilliant scientist has recently come to your state. His name is Donald Trump. And Donald Trump has been studying these issues for decades. And he alone and uniquely has concluded there is no drought in California. And in addition to that, in addition to that, this brilliant scientist has concluded, in opposition to virtually the entire scientific community, that climate change is a hoax. Now, I am not shocked that Donald Trump thinks that climate change is a hoax, because that's what, sadly enough, most Republican politicians believe. But I was a little bit shocked when he said it was a hoax perpetrated on us by the Chinese. See, I thought that he would have told us that it was a hoax perpetuated on us by the Mexicans or the Muslims. But the Chinese, I can't get that. But let me tell Mr. Trump and everybody else that climate change is not a hoax. I have talked to scientists all over our country and all over the world, because I'm a member of the Senate Environmental Committee. And the scientific community is virtually united in telling us climate change is real, it is caused by human activity, it is already doing devastating harm in our country and throughout the world. That is the reality. And the other reality is that all of us, as human beings, are custodians of this planet. And we have a profound moral responsibility to leave this planet in a way that is healthy and habitable for your children and my grandchildren and for future generations. And that is why we will tell the fossil fuel industry, despite all of their power, despite all of the ads they put on TV, we are going to tell them that your short-term profits, fossil fuel industry, are not more important than the future of this planet. And that is why we are going to transform our energy system away from fossil fuel to energy efficiency and sustainable energy. And as I said earlier, we are also going to end fracking. What this campaign is about is understanding what the needs are of human beings and the needs are of the American people. And one of the fundamental needs of all people is access to good quality health care. So let me be as straightforward with you as I can be. I believe that health care is a right of all people. Now, the Affordable Care Act has done some very important things, but we have got to go further. How many people here have no health insurance? How many people here are underinsured with high deductibles and high co-payments? That is why we have got to move to a Medicare for all healthcare system. And that is why we are going to end the greed of the pharmaceutical industry, which charges us the highest prices in the world for prescription drugs. Every year in this country, 40,000 Americans die because they don't get to the doctor when they should, because they don't have health insurance or they cannot afford their deductibles. That is unacceptable. Together, we're going to end that. People go to the doctor when they should. Brothers and sisters, we all know that the most important lesson that we can learn from American history is that real change never occurs from the top on down, but always from the bottom on up. Frederick Douglass, the great abolitionist, made that point, that freedom and dignity is never given to people. People have got to stand up and fight for it. Think back 100+ years ago when workers in Vermont and California and all across this country were working 7 days a week, 12 hours a day. Where children of 10, 12 years of age were working in factories. But what the working people of this country said, we are human beings, we are not animals or beasts of burden, we demand dignity. And what they did with great courage is to stand up and form trade unions so that they had some say on the job, so that they could negotiate decent contracts. And we thank the trade union movement for giving us the modern American middle class. Think back 150 years ago amidst the abomination of slavery, when African Americans and their allies looked around them and they saw such ugliness, such horror. But they said that the day will come, and they put their lives on the line to make that day come, when this country will rid itself of the barbarity of racism and bigotry and discrimination. And we will never know the names of those heroes and heroines who went to jail, who were killed, who were beaten, who lost their jobs for standing up for civil rights and human rights. Think about 100 years ago, and the children don't know this. 100 years ago, no time at all from an historical perspective, women in America did not have the right to vote, to get the education they wanted, or the jobs they wanted. Just 100 years ago. But women stood up and fought back. In a culture of 100+ years ago, where the establishment said to women, your job is to stay home and have babies, women said, sorry, we will define who we are, not the establishment. And women and their male allies fought back and said that in America, women will not be second-class citizens. That was 100 years ago. Think about how we've made other change even more recently. Think about the fact that if we were here 10 years ago and somebody jumped up and said, you know, Bernie, I think that by the year 2015, gay marriage will be legal in every state in this country. First, people here would have said, you're nuts, it can't happen. Homophobia and hatred are just too strong. It will never happen, or certainly not by 2015. But what happened is the gay community and their straight allies, they stood up, they fought back. And they said loudly and proudly that in America, people should have the right to love whoever they wanted, regardless of gender. Think about 5 years ago. If somebody here said, you know, Bernie, there's $7.25 an hour federal minimum wage, it's a joke, it's a starvation wage, we gotta raise it to $15 an hour. Somebody said that, the person next door would have said, $15 an hour, you're nuts. You're an extremist, you're crazy, you're thinking too big. Maybe we can get $9, maybe we can get $10, 15, too high, too much. But then what happened with incredible courage? Workers in the fast food industry, McDonald's, Burger King, Wendy's, they went out on strike. And they told this country, no worker can make it on $7.25 an hour. And then what happened? A few years ago in Seattle, they raised the minimum wage to $15 an hour. And then San Francisco and Los Angeles, 50. And then California and New York State, 50. If I'm elected president, $15 an hour in every state in this country. Here is my point. Throughout history, the establishment, the ruling class, always wants to intimidate people, always tells you it can't happen. You want workers' rights? Forget about it. You want civil rights and the end of racism? Can't happen. You want women to vote? Oh my God. You think gay people should have the right to marry? What an idea. You think workers should make at least $15 an hour? Crazy idea. This is what has always happened. The message of the ruling class is think small, not big. But you know what? I've been all over this country, and as Bob Dylan said, things are changing. People are beginning to think outside of the box. People are thinking in ways that corporate media does not want us to think, that Congress does not want us to think. And people are saying, why not? Why should the middle class continue to shrink with almost all new income and wealth going to the 1%? Why should we be the only major country on earth not to guarantee paid family and medical leave? Why should our young people leave college $30,000, $70,000 in debt? Why should our infrastructure, our roads, our bridges, our water systems continue to crumble when we have millions of workers out there ready to rebuild that infrastructure? Why do we continue to have an immigration policy which is broken? Why do we have our inner cities continuing to crumble? Why are we the only major country on earth not to guarantee health care to all people as a right? And those are the questions that people are asking, and they do not want to see tiny little changes. They want to see real change in this country. And the American people understand that the only way we bring about real change is when we have the guts to stand up to the billionaire class and Wall Street and the fossil fuel industry and the drug companies. And the American people all understand that the only way we have real change is when millions of people from coast to coast stand up, fight back, and demand a Congress that represents all of us, not just wealthy campaign contributors. And that is what the political revolution is all about. Now, in 3 days, on Tuesday, this great state is going to be having the most important primary in the entire Democratic nominating process. The most important. 475 delegates are coming up. And let me tell you what I believe is going to happen on Tuesday. One of 3 things will happen. If there is a large voter turnout, if working people and young people and people who have given up on the political process come back in and vote and demand a government that works for us and not the 1%, if that happens, we win.